You've played historically a really, really important role in the development of generative AI when you were formerly at Google and led the research that led to some of the transformations that we are seeing the impact of now. Now, of course, leading Cohere, very much focused on the enterprise component. What are you seeing in terms of demand from businesses for your kind of AI-powered tech products? What is the demand looking like? What sectors and which sectors are you seeing the demand coming from?
Yeah, so it's definitely blown up. I think enterprise has woken up to the technology, in particular in the back half of this year. And in terms of sectors, it's totally horizontal. So obviously, these models, they read and write language. And so language tends to appear wherever there's a lot of humans. And so that's every single industry, medicine, tech, legal, it's all over the place.
It's interesting that you say that the back half of this year has been this kind of watershed moment in terms of enterprise take-up. What do you think has been behind that? Is it some of the frictions being removed around data security? Is it a better understanding of the products, the implementation? What has led to that kind of watershed moment that you're seeing right now for enterprise?
So I think there was a mad scramble to gain competency in the technology. Everyone got first-hand experience using it thanks to these chat applications for consumers. And so enterprises realized the opportunity. And it took them some time to start to get smart, to get familiar and understand what the use cases are, where they can deploy it and how they can transform their business. It's really been the back half of the year where it started to get to, let's actually do the work. Let's start integrating this. Let's really, transform our businesses and our products.
What do you think it is going to mean for the workforces of these companies in 1, 2, 3 years' time? I know you've talked about human in the loop alongside some of these AI products. Goldman Sachs says about 2/3 of the global workforce could ultimately be impacted by generative AI. How are you thinking about how it transforms the workspace and the workforce?
I think that impact is going to be almost entirely augmentative as opposed to a replacement. And so these tools will just make jobs more fulfilling. They'll take away the menial, sort of low-level, boring stuff that you don't want to do. You can pass that to a bot. And instead, you'll use these things as tools. So I don't see displacement. I see augmentation and a new set of tools for workers to be more productive. I think that in society, we're really supply constrained. Like, we just don't have the bandwidth as a species to do all the stuff we want to do. And so a lot just falls by the wayside. And so I don't see this being replacing of humans. It's more augmenting, and we can do more and do more of the stuff that we actually want to spend our time doing.
You have some big-name investors, of course, and some really important partnerships with the likes of Alphabet, with the likes of Amazon. How are you thinking about deepening those relationships with Alphabet, with Amazon? What could that look like in the years ahead?
We have loads of great partners spanning Oracle, like you say, Amazon and Google. I think we're going to continue investing in those relationships. We really want to serve their customers on cloud. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing our models in their environments in a way that's totally safe and secure. And so all three of those partners, all three of those clouds have been fantastic to Cohere and making that a possibility.
On the question of risk and existential risk, you've talked about the fact that the focus on existential risk from generative AI is leading us to miss the crucial risks of the here and now around, for example, misinformation, around data security, around some of the potential data biases that might be coming through. Just expand on your opposition to the idea, to the focus on existential risks.
Yeah, so I'm not opposed to the exploration of existential risk. I think it's a really fascinating academic subject. I spend a lot of time thinking about it, as do many in my field. I think in terms of the public conversation and public policy, it's really important that we focus on the pieces that can be regulated, that policy can positively affect. And this technology, it's nearing its point of prime time. It's going to start being deployed into scenarios like medicine, law. Like you say, there's a risk around disinformation and the impersonation of people. And so those are very concrete, near-term risks that I don't think are being spoken about enough. Instead, we're being kind of consumed by narratives of terminators and doomsday scenarios, which is distracting from those much more pressing and imminent risks, which we currently we don't have the tools to mitigate. And so that's where we should be focused instead of a theoretical and academically interesting long-term doomsday scenario.
People like Yann LeCun, a big thinker in the world of AI and, of course, leading the development of AI at Meta, have said that this is also an attempt, the focus on existential risks, is an attempt by the likes of, and he's called them out, Sam Altman at OpenAI, Demis Hassabis at DeepMind, and others, to build a moat around their existing businesses and keep the upstarts from taking a bigger slice of the pie. Do you think that's at play as well?
I don't want to be cynical, so I won't comment on my...
You've hinted at that, though.
My competitors. I think there's very genuine concern around this technology, both at the near-term end and the long-term future. I have no reason to think it's disingenuous. But certainly it is pulling attention away from much more near-term, immediate concerns that we should be focused on, and we're not.
There's very much, when it comes to regulation, a lack of uniformity. If we look across the world, the US have come through with their executive orders, but also a voluntary code that a number of companies, including yours, have signed up to. The EU have their AI Act. The UK has more of a laissez-faire approach. What do you think is the appropriate regulatory framework for this technology?
No, I think we're in the process of discovery for that. My personal opinion is that a sectoral approach is the right one. We have expert regulators inside of medicine, inside of finance. They know their domain best, and they know how to protect their customers, their patients. And so I would empower them to gain expertise in the technology and implement protections there, as opposed to creating a new horizontal body which tries to fight on all of these different fronts. I strongly believe that empowering existing regulators is the right way forward.
What do you think of the executive action of the Biden administration this week? Do you welcome it, or does it concern you?
You know, I think it's good that there's a priority being put on this. It's time for policy. I think we're past the point of debate as to whether there should be regulation in AI or not. We know there should be. And so this is spurring action, and I think that's very good. In terms of the policy specifically, my interpretation is going to depend on how it's actually implemented. So it's very vague right now. It provides kind of high-level steers and guides, but it's going to, I'm going to have to wait and see how it's actually implemented to build a sense of whether I think it's good for market, good for protecting consumers, and protecting enterprises.
Okay, so implementation is going to be central. You're increasingly becoming a global company. You're headquartered, of course, in Toronto. You've got offices in San Francisco. You have offices here in London. You're attending the UK AI Safety Summit. The UK would like to think that it can position itself as a global leader, not just in the development of the technology, but the regulatory framework as well, or at least the building together of a consensus around regulation. How realistic do you think those ambitions are from your position?
Yeah, so I studied here. I went to school at Oxford. And so I think the UK has a massive opportunity. And I'm really proud to see this government bringing the world together to discuss this issue. I think they are taking a leadership position. The talent here is unmatched. I think a majority of Cohere's machine learning expertise at the research level is based out of London. And this ecosystem is so strong. So I think the opportunity for Britain is huge. And they are taking a very active leading role. I don't think it's just talk or public framing. I think there really is so much talent here and a real opportunity to lead.
And your message to other executives and your message to regulators and lawmakers over the next 2 days is going to be what?
It's going to be to focus on concrete harms, not theoretical, academic, long-term future harms, but the things that are going to be affecting the public in the next 2, 3, 4 years. I think that's where we've had a gap in terms of public discourse and regulation, and so that's where we really need to focus.
Okay, I think I have time for one last one. At the business level, You're backed by one of your backers, NVIDIA, of course, leader, of course, in the building out of chips, GPUs for generative AI. I know they don't give you preferential treatment, you've said, for these chips, but the cost of compute is enormous. Tens of thousands of dollars just for a single chip, millions of dollars to train, tens of millions of dollars to train the kind of models that you operate. How concerned are you about the cost of compute? Do you see that cost coming down? How important is it that that cost comes down in order to see this technology widely dispersed?
Yeah, it has been coming down consistently, so it's getting much cheaper per flop, which is our unit of compute power. And so I really hope and expect that to continue. You're completely right to point out that it's extremely expensive and requires, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars to train these models. And so I very much do hope that cost comes down.
Okay, yeah, I saw your eyes roll when I talked about the cost of compute. So it's clearly on your mind. One final one, Aidan, before we let you go. What does Cohere as a business look like as you try to embed these solutions in enterprises and global businesses? What does it look like in 2, 3, 4 years' time? What is the end goal for you ultimately?
The end goal for us is to be the enterprise partner for AI. So we want to be the most trusted implementer, model provider, totally cloud agnostic, available wherever the customer needs us, and completely data private. So data is like the core asset of an enterprise, and we want to protect that. And we want to make sure that there's no additional risk, there's no data leakage, model leakage, and so it's a huge priority for us. So we want to be that central partner to the enterprise world.